We have to be troublemakers because that is how the world evolves and changes for the better. If we all just sit around and say, nope, I'm just gonna wait until it's comfortable, nothing gets done. Normalize being afraid. Don't feel bad that you feel fearful or you're anxious about speaking up. That's normal. What you have to do now is intentionally choose courage in those moments. It is a decision, not a personality trait, a decision to choose courage when it is tough, when fear is easier, and when your comfort zone feels tempting.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of The Future of Work. My guest today, Luvvie Ajayi Jones. She's the author of several best-selling books, including I'm Judging You, The Do Better Manual, which, by the way, is a title that I love, and a brand new book called Professional Troublemaker, The Fear Fighter Manual. She's also a podcast host, speaker, and her TED Talk on how to get comfortable with being uncomfortable is now approaching over 6 million views on TED. So Luvvie, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So before we talk about your book, I was actually doing some research and I wanted to ask you questions that a lot of other people have not been asking you. And so to start, I'm a big believer that a lot of who we are as people is shaped by those around us. And so I want to go back before we even start talking about you to who shaped who you are. So your philosophies, your attitudes, your beliefs, where did all that come from?
I think my beliefs and my philosophies have been shaped by a lot of people, but it started with my mom and my grandmother. You know, they're the people who I watched growing up, who infused their core values into me, you know, generosity, and this form of service to the world. I think I've been raised with the idea that my life is not just purely my own, and that if I'm okay, then I got to make sure that other people are too. And I think that's been a big part of me. That's been significant.
Yeah. Well, it's for my family as well. So I come from an immigrant family. They came from the Republic of Georgia, and it's similar. And I saw that you, I think it was in your book, you talk about your grandmother and how she taught you how to take up space. And my wife actually did a video specifically on women fairly recently where she talked about how as young girls, they're always taught to not take up space, to kind of shrink, to be quiet. And she also is a big believer that you should take up space, let your voice be heard. So it seems like your grandmother had a lot of influence and impact on you as well.
Absolutely. I think my grandmother was literally the opposite of don't take up space. She was like, take up space without apology. And it wasn't that it was even something she said. It's just how she moved through the world. She was very clear that every room that she was in, they were basically being gifted with her presence. And, you know, she never shrank. She wasn't in a room and was like, oh my God, no. I don't belong in here. It was the opposite. My grandmother was somebody who made a home out of any room that she was in. And I think it was incredible to watch because to see her not shrink gave me permission to not shrink.
Yeah.
Women are absolutely told over and over again in different ways to be less than, to question themselves and doubt themselves to a fault. Women are told that if we take up space, we're somehow being arrogant, or somehow not doing our part as nurturers. And I think that's the wrong messaging. We've internalized such wrong messaging. And it is time for us to start stretching, to start letting ourselves be seen and heard without feeling guilt and shame around it. Our voices are just as valuable as anybody else's.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And you actually, I read you grew up in Nigeria. You left there when you were 9. It ended up in Chicago. So what was it like growing up in Nigeria and then coming to Chicago? I'm really curious about your kind of the path that led you to where you are now.
Yeah, I had a great childhood. I was always surrounded by love. We we're not struggling. I never worried about where my next meal is coming from. We moved to the U.S. when it was time for my sister to start college. And my mom wanted her to really have a chance to go to school here, higher learning here. So that's why we moved. Moving to U.S. was a culture shock, major culture shock. Yeah. It was the first time that I was different. It was the first time that my name sounded different. It was the first time that the way I talked was strange. So for me, that was a major shock to my system as a 9-year-old. But the gift of it all is that kids adapt very quickly. Kids are resilient. So I knew that my accent sounded weird, and I knew that, my name would be hard to pronounce. So I actually lost most of my accent by just listening to my classmates speak. And I was like, I can do that. By high school, I didn't have an accent anymore. And yeah, but I think that transition, I didn't leave who I was behind though. Yeah. I think the gift of it is that my first 9 years being in a country where everybody looks the same fortified me in a way that I don't even realize, that I probably still underestimate. It didn't make me question myself so much. I was very proud of who I was, and I had a deep sense of who I was.
Yeah, my original last name is actually Mami Sashvili, and so when my dad came to the United States from the Republic of Georgia, he wanted it to sound more American, so he changed it from that to Morgan, hence the Jacob Morgan. But it's really interesting. I mean, I love hearing about people's stories and how you got to where you are. Okay, so you get to the United States, you're a young child. What's next? I mean, what did the next few years of your life look like, and how did you ultimately get to writing a book, to speaking at TED, to doing all these really amazing things that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I went to the University of Illinois for college. My major was psychology, pre-med coming in, because I thought I was going to be a doctor. That's what the dream was. And that dream ended when I got a D in Chemistry 101. I got a solid D, first and last of my career. But it was a gift because it pivoted me. It made me realize I didn't want to be a doctor. It's just a dream that I had taken on because other people had given it to me. So, and I was like, I don't even like hospitals. So I instantly dropped the pre-med with the idea of doing psychology because I still loved it. I loved it, still love it. But that semester I actually started blogging. My friends peer pressured me into blogging and starting this little, back then it was called a weblog. And online journaling, Xanga, LiveJournal.
Good old days.
Some of us know that exactly, like dating myself. And what that did was it made me fall in love with writing outside of the classroom. When I graduated from college in 2006, I deleted my college blog and started what is now awesomelyluvvie.com, the blog that I still have. And I talked about the world as I saw it. I talked about my thoughts. I talked about TV, race, politics, feminism, whatever it is. And I made sure to just tell the truth out loud. But back then, nobody was necessarily thinking of blogging as a thing, right?
Yeah.
It wasn't a career that you could actively put credence into. And that was a gift because I was writing in the way that was truest to me because I had no agenda. I wasn't doing it because I was being strategic, that if I blog, this thing will happen. I was just writing for the love. And what that did was it gave me the practice of speaking the truth out loud. The site got bigger and bigger as people would read my pieces and share it. I wasn't advertising. I was posting on social sometimes, but people would be like, oh my gosh, you're saying what I was thinking, but I dared not to say. In 2009, the blog won an award, Best Humor Blog in the Black Web Blog Awards. So I'd go to work as a marketing coordinator from 9 to 5, and I'd come home and write some random thing on this blog, and people would laugh, and they said it brought them joy. In April 2010, I got laid off my full-time job because of budget cuts. And, I didn't take that as an instant sign that I was supposed to focus on writing as my career. I was still searching on LinkedIn or Indeed and Monster for new jobs. But in the meantime, I was doing marketing and branding consulting for small businesses and bloggers, because that's what I was doing full time. And I loved it. So I was like, well, while I'm waiting for my full-time job that I'm going to get next, I'll be doing this to make money. So, but the thing is, I never had a chance to get another full-time job. The blog took on a life of its own. It really started getting even more attention. And then 2012, beginning of 2012, February, I had credentials to the Academy Awards. Wow. On the red carpet and backstage. A lot of journalists and writers and media people will have access to the red carpet. I also had it backstage, which was super special. And I remember being there, being like, I had spent all this time afraid of calling myself a writer, because I hadn't seen a writer who was successful doing what I was doing, which was ultimately, I wasn't a novelist. I was not a journalist. I was just a girl writing her opinions and her thoughts. So for me, it felt too abstract. It felt too big of a title to take on. And I was like, Toni Morrison's a writer. How can I call myself the same thing as her? But when I was in that room at the Academy Awards, and I'm standing next to people who work for the BBC, and I'm like, they got in here because of their words. I did too. So how can I not call myself a writer?
Yeah.
And I feel like that moment convicted me and made me say, you are a writer. It might not look like what you're used to seeing, but you're a writer. You are using your words to touch people and make impact. And you've been doing this thing for such a long time. You are a writer. And I think that's when I finally owned it. That's when I finally was like, okay, yeah, this is the job. I'm not waiting for another job. This is the job. And yeah, a couple of years later, I had my idea for my first book after being plagiarized by a journalist who took 3 paragraphs of my work and dropped it in theirs without any credit.
Really?
Yep. And I tweeted, is there not a limited edition handbook on how not to be terrible at being a human? And I instantly was like, that's my book. And that's how I came up with the idea for I'm Judging You, the Do Better manual. Because I was like, we got to do better. Yeah. I'm going to write the manual for it. And that's what I did.
So they literally just took your words and put it into their own book?
Yeah.
Wow. That's pretty bold.
Very bold and ridiculous.
Yeah, especially in a world that's so transparent now. You can't get away with that stuff.
But that was a gift, because I had the idea for this for the first book, and the book came out, and it was a instant New York Times bestseller, and it changed my life. It came out in 2016, September 2016. And wow. I've been a speaker, an author, a digital strategist. I'm a multi-hyphenate who is using her words, her brain power, her truth to show up in this world, hoping to inspire other people that they also deserve to show up as themselves, and they deserve all the good things.
It's really fascinating because just hearing you talk, it sounds like there were a lot of these sort of moments that were tough that a lot of people might get very upset by. For example, not calling yourself a writer, somebody plagiarizing your work. But you took all these moments and learned something from getting laid off. And you spun these moments around from being things that were negatively impacting you to looking at the bright side and how you can actually use that to excel and grow. And I love that approach because I feel like a lot of times when bad things happen to us, we kind of just put our heads down and we think, woe is me. It's kind of the end of the world. But being able to turn that around, I think, is a very, very important skill. You talk a lot about, obviously the title of your new book is all about being a troublemaker, and we're always taught that being a troublemaker is bad. I even remember when I was younger, my parents and grandparents would say, "Oh, you're such a troublemaker, stop being a troublemaker." Why are you arguing that this is actually a good thing?
I think it's an amazing thing. To make trouble in this world is to disrupt what's happening. And let's be clear, a lot of things that are happening in the world are not okay. So being a disruptor for good is necessary. We need more of that. And troublemakers are people who are committed to elevating the rooms that they're in. They're committed to doing the work to build the world they want to see. They want to do the thing that's necessary, even if it's really hard, because they know that sometimes you have to do hard things. And we need more people to lean into troublemaking. I think about the late, great John Lewis, who I quoted in this book, who said we need to be ready to make necessary good trouble. We have to be willing to do things that feel tough, say things that feel tough in this world. We got to challenge things that are happening that we're not proud of. We cannot be quiet and inactive in the face of injustice around us, whether big ones or even small things that are happening in the meetings that we're in, at the dinner table that we're in. We have to be troublemakers because that is how the world evolves and changes for the better. If we all just sit around and say, nope, I'm just going to wait until it's comfortable, nothing gets done.
Yeah. No, couldn't agree more. I'm curious, from a lot of the work that you do, speaking, writing, how would some of this translate into an organization? Because I feel like, it's one thing around a dinner table or to be with friends to make trouble. But I feel like a lot of people inside of a company, they feel very scared and hesitant to speak up. They don't want to make trouble. They don't want to get reprimanded. They don't want to look stupid. So how does this translate into a work environment where you're surrounded by your peers, your coworkers, your managers who are judging you? Any advice for how to deal with that?
Yeah, whether you're speaking up at the dinner table or in the meeting, it's the same type of fear of you not wanting to be the person that stands out too much. You don't want to be the one that rocks the boat. We're afraid of being the one that disrupts it. But here's the thing. We're all sitting there uncomfortable when somebody makes a joke that's not good, that we are not proud of, that we would not laugh at if other people saw. So when we're at a company, around a table with our colleagues, and they put forth an idea that's not thoughtful, that we would not be proud to attach our name to, and we're quiet, what we're doing in that moment is choosing the fake harmony over the necessary truth that should be told. You can be thoughtful troublemakers, and by just saying, hey, I would love for us to rethink that idea because I want to make sure that it will make the impact we would like for it to make. That is a thoughtful way to make trouble in that room. Because you're saying, let's think about the questions we haven't thought about. Let's think about the blind spots that we haven't thought about. Let's make sure that this messaging hits in the way it needs to hit. And if you are at the table, you should be somebody who other people trust to hold them accountable and to watch their back, right? If I'm sitting at the table, you know that the work we're going to create is going to be as thoughtful as possible because I will ask you about it if it's not. And it's not about interrogating you, and it's not about making you look stupid. It's about saying, hey, all our heads are necessary to make this as good as it needs to be. So our questions are necessary. I think question asking challenges are favors. When you have a company of people who never challenge you, you're going to fall flat on your face more times than are necessary. Because if you create an environment where people don't feel like they can come to you with challenges and they can come to you with questions, what they'll do is they'll just let you fail over and over again, as opposed to feel deeply invested and responsible for what happens. So I think it's for companies, it's not even a matter of whether you should tolerate troublemakers. You shouldn't just tolerate them. Adam Grant, his book, Think Again, his book and my book talk to each other, and we didn't even realize it. But he calls it the challenge network. So what I call the troublemakers, he calls the challenge network. You need challenge network in your life because how do you know when you're actually doing what you're supposed to do in the best way possible? How are people going to be around you and feel comfortable bringing their best selves if they don't feel like they can tell you the truth about an idea or ask you a question about it? Companies have to not just tolerate troublemakers and challengers. They have to celebrate them, welcome them. Like when I'm in a meeting, I'm the CEO of my own company. And when I'm in a meeting with my team, I don't ask who agrees. I ask who disagrees. I say, does anybody think, is there holes in here that we're missing? I ask about what I've missed as opposed to ask for somebody to say, yes, that's an amazing idea. I don't need that. I need the person who tells me, let's make this stronger. Or, I don't think we should actually do this. Here's why. You know, and it makes me a better leader to be able to trust my team to do that for me, because I know that I can come to them with ideas, half-baked. And if they're half-baked, by the time the meeting is done, it will be fully fledged. As opposed to me thinking I have to come to the idea with a full idea, because if I don't, they won't tell me if it's still half-baked. I think the work is actually in welcoming the challenges, welcoming the question, and saying, I would love to hear if you disagree with this and how we can make this better. That will always get you better work than when you're asking for approval and cosigns. Yeah,
no, I love that advice. I want to unpack those two things a little bit, because you gave a lot of, I think, fascinating pieces of advice. So first is, if you want to be the troublemaker, it sounds like there's a right way and a wrong way to go about it. The wrong way would probably be, hey, this sucks. You're stupid. Like, you know, none of that makes sense. So you can be a troublemaker in a tactful, tasteful way. Okay. Which I think that's an important thing for people to realize, that it's not just about causing problems. It's about identifying these things in an adult-like way, as opposed to just complaining about stuff.
Exactly. So it's not just you want to be the person that's pointing out what's foolish. You offer solutions. And your challenging is not for the sake of making somebody sound stupid. It's to say, hey, I'm just watching out. And I think in this whole process, because so many people are not used to being challenged, even your thoughtful question asking can still run afoul of people. So your challenging cannot be based on how somebody will receive it, because you cannot control that.
Yep.
However somebody will receive you saying, hey, let's rethink that, somebody might be like, oh my God, I can't believe. How the person receives it does not make your statement less impactful or valid or necessary. So you have to remove yourself from the idea that you're saying it because the person is going to love this idea that you're going to put forward, or love the fact that you're challenging them this way. You have to remove yourself, divorce yourself from how the person who's receiving this information is actually going to receive it.
Yeah.
Whether or not you're going to love what I say, I still have to say it. As long as I am saying it as thoughtful as possible, that's my job. And then after that, I just have to let it go. Which is why whenever I want to say something tough, or something that it was just in a room where I'm like, oh gosh, I'm disagreeing with somebody, I ask myself 3 questions. And if the answer is yes to all 3, I say it. So it's, do I mean it? Can I defend it? Am I saying it thoughtfully? If the answer is yes to all 3, I say it. And then I deal with whatever comes. Somebody's hurt feelings might come. Somebody being upset that their authority being challenged might come. That really has nothing to do with me. And it's not something that should keep me silent.
I love that idea of removing yourself from the equation, because it's important. When you remove yourself from the equation, you realize that we should be speaking up far more times than we actually do. And if you're a leader of a team or a leader of an organization, you also gave, I think, a really important piece of advice, which I want to make sure we highlight, and that is the types of questions that you ask to encourage your team members to be troublemakers. And one of them you pointed out was, don't ask everybody if they agree with you, ask who disagrees, why they disagree, and encourage that kind of behavior.
Yes.
Are there any other things that you think leaders can do a better job of to encourage those around them to be more troublemakers?
Yeah, I think how you operate really matters, because some people stop being troublemakers or will be quiet because they've seen how you reacted to other people's questions. They've seen somebody else be punished or gaslit for asking a question. They've seen that in a room, in a meeting, an intern got shut out because they dared to ask for more information. So you also have to operate with this in a real way and create the environment that welcomes it and doesn't punish it. So ask the question, be more affirmative in terms of welcoming this and not just saying I'm going to tolerate it. And then do not punish people who dare speak up. don't do it. If you are saying, I'm going to welcome being challenged, and the person gets a terrible review because they ask too many questions in a meeting, then the messaging that you just sent out to everybody is, you were just saying that for no reason. You just didn't even mean it.
Yeah. No, I think it's great advice for leaders out there. So obviously the title of your TED Talk was really all about how to get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I talked to a bunch of CEOs on this podcast, and I always ask them, what are things that set them apart that help make them more successful? And they always tell me the same thing. They run to the projects that everybody else is scared of. They take on the things that everybody else is uncomfortable with. They do things that they don't think they're quite ready for. So can you talk about the importance of why we should be putting ourselves out of our comfort zone, even though we might feel so safe if we're just doing things in our wheelhouse?
Yeah, our comfort zones are not the place where big things are waiting for us. They're not the place where the best life that we want to live is waiting for us. Because the reason why it's comfortable is because you've learned all you've had to learn. There is nothing in there that challenges you. And there's no way you're going to grow. You'll just be. Mm-hmm. So you have to actually do something outside your comfort zone. And usually, even one conversation that feels tough with a friend can take you outside your comfort zone. But at the end of the conversation, you and your friend might be closer because you find common ground. You know, you might be mad at each other, but you have this one conversation and you realize, oh, we both just misinterpreted something. You end up, you had to go through the discomfort, but on the other side of it is understanding. The comfort zone is a trap. We get there, like, it is a trap, right? It is something that just keeps us there, grounded in the same place we've been in. But to get bigger, to get greater, to unlock this audacious life that you want, it doesn't exist in your comfort zone. So you're going to have to ask for the raise, ask for the promotion, go for that degree, have the tough conversation, challenge the coworker or your boss, you know, wear something that you typically would never wear, a different color, something. And because on the other side, you will learn more about yourself. And the best case scenario is you might love that thing you did. You might get an answer to the question you asked that says yes. You might get that raise and be able to afford the apartment you couldn't before. My editor, Meg Leader of Penguin Random House, after she edited my book, she asked for a raise. Because in the book, I have a whole chapter that says, ask for more. And she got the raise and a promotion. Her assistant then gets promoted to an editor. And I'm like, that's what happens when we do the things outside of our comfort zone over and over again. You won't always get the yes, but you will get more yeses than if you just say nothing. You will absolutely win because you're taking more risks.
Yeah, I think as the famous quote, I think it was it Michael Jordan who said you're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I think it was Michael Jordan. Somebody can correct me afterwards if I got that wrong, but I love that approach. And actually, this one was particularly relevant and meaningful to me as far as getting out of your comfort zone, because when I talked to my dad about how he migrated from Russia to the United States, he was telling me this story about how he lived in a low-income housing area in New Jersey. And he had the option to live near a bunch of other Russian speakers or to live next to people who spoke English. And he decided to live next to all the English speakers, even though he didn't speak a word of English. And I said, Dad, why wouldn't you want to live in a neighborhood where you're surrounded by other Russians who you can communicate with? And he said, because that's too comfortable for me. I left Russia to get away from that, and I want to assimilate to American culture. I want to understand American society and life and learn how to speak the language. And I'm not going to do that unless I push myself out of my comfort zone. And to me, that sounded terrifying because he was here in the United States by himself. The rest of us were in Australia because they were migrating in the process. And so he's here alone in a neighborhood, low income, doesn't speak the language, doesn't have any money. And I just hear those types of stories. And it's amazing the types of things that people can accomplish when they push themselves out of their comfort zone.
I love that. I love that story. Your dad did something that allowed him to grow, and he knew his clarity. And that he basically ran towards the thing that was uncomfortable. He was like, I will put myself, and that's so admirable. And we have to start doing that more often. We got to start doing it because the lives that we want to live is literally on the other side of our comfort zone. But we just, it's because we see, it's almost like the bridge, right? But you're afraid to cross the bridge. And it's like, if you cross the bridge, the treasures are right there. Just cross the bridge.
Yep. So I have one follow-up question I want to ask on that before I jump into one of your stories that you talked about. What happens if you fall off the bridge? Because this oftentimes does happen. We speak up and then we say something stupid. We take on a big project and we fail. We take on an opportunity to speak and, maybe, comedians, they get booed off stage all the time or they get heckled. So how do you deal with that, that negativity that might come your way? Because that's a huge fear for a lot of people is I don't want the backlash.
Yeah, I think we think about the bridge as this 300-foot fall that will kill us. But it's not. The comedian that gets heckled off the stage, it doesn't ruin their career when they get heckled off one stage. They'll get back on the stage the next day. They might get heckled off that. They'll get back on the stage the next day. Every comedian that you know has been heckled off at least 10 stages.
Oh, at least, yeah.
At least, right? So imagine if they were afraid of being heckled. They would never become the icons we know now. So you have to think about life as that. We're always thinking the bridge is going to destroy us. Falling off the bridge will destroy. You will fall off the bridge. Guaranteed. You will fail on the way to doing something audacious. You will absolutely fail. Anybody who lives a life of note will fail, will fall off a bridge. But the bridge will not end your life. Doing that will not end your life. It will not destroy you. I think fear keeps us from physical harm, right? Mm-hmm. We don't put our hands in fire because we know it'll burn us. We don't jump out of a plane without a parachute because we know we will fall flat to the ground and lose our lives. But that same thing is what keeps us from asking for that raise, right? It's what keeps us from getting on that stage and trying a set out. And it's like everything is not the disastrous bridge fall. You will expect to fall. Give yourself permission to fall because it'll give you freedom to do more, right? It'll give you freedom to say, even if I fall, I'll stand right back up. Or maybe after it stops being sore, I'll be able to stand up. Remove the idea that every failure is destruction. Remove the idea that you're not supposed to fail because there's no way that if you want to live a life of note, you won't fail. If you're not, that means you're not doing anything of note. So that's why I wrote the chapter Fail Loudly in this book, because I'm like, it's not just that you might fail, it's that you will fail. You won't know when it's necessarily coming. When you do, one, do not then say, this is my fault for trying to be bold. You were supposed to. But when you fail, the only real reason it might be a fail is if you learned nothing from it. If you actually fell flat on your face and then were able to realize, I know exactly what went wrong. I know exactly what I was supposed to learn from this. It wasn't a true failure. It was a pivoting experience. It was a growth moment where you needed a lesson that you didn't currently have. So you had to go through that experience. I've absolutely failed. I've gotten in trouble for things I've said. And each time it's made me pivot and be more thoughtful and be more elevated as a thinker and feel more responsible. So I think we should kind of just make friends with failure. It's tough, mind you. Like in the moment of the fail, it hurts your feelings, hurts your heart. Yep. Ego bruised. You might lose some money. But on the other side of it, you end up being like, that's why that was supposed to happen.
And I think it's also important, and you talk about this as well, that the goal isn't to eliminate fear because you can never get rid of fear, but it's to know how to approach fear and to use it as something that could be channeled in a positive way instead of something that can be keeping you from achieving the things that you want. Mm-hmm. So is that right? I mean, should we not be trying to get rid of fear?
Yeah, because fear is a lifelong thing. It's a very universal emotion. It is as natural as love and joy. Fear is here to stay. What we have to commit to is not using fear to make our decisions. It's not letting fear be the thing that makes us say yes or no to something, an opportunity, a conversation, a challenge. It's understanding that to be fearless is not that you're not afraid. It just means that you're not letting the fear make you do less. So you will always move forward regardless. If you know you're supposed to do this thing, just because it makes you anxious, has you doubtful, has you fearful, does not mean you're not supposed to do it. And in those moments, you have the responsibility to choose courage. Because you have to have the fear before you can have any type of courage. So to be brave, to be courageous, you got to be afraid first. Because if it was easy, everybody would be doing whatever that thing is. The difference is that there are some people who commit to doing it in spite of the fact that they're scared.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. So one of the stories that I was hoping you could share, and I'm using you as an example because a lot of the things that happen to you, I think, are very highly exaggerated. In other words, the things that happen to you, because you're in a very public life, it's never going to be that extreme for a mid-level manager in a company who speaks up in a meeting. But you were sharing a story of how you sent out some tweets and then you got criticized. People were writing about you. You were called anti-American, anti-Black American, and people were just plastering your name everywhere and really going after you. So can you share a little bit about that story and how you were dealing with that? Because that is, like I said, a much bigger fail to deal with than somebody who might just get laughed at in a meeting. Yeah, you have the whole world watching you.
Yeah, and I want people to read chapter 7 for the full details of it. But I think for that moment, I wanted to show what it was like to fall off a bridge. Okay, to fall off the bridge in a very public way. Something that is a lot of people's greatest nightmare. And I got up. It knocked me off my square for a bit, but I got up. And it's important to talk about that part because, being troublemakers and being opinionated and being people who show upright, you will absolutely fall. You will absolutely run afoul of people. You will absolutely say something that maybe you shouldn't have said, but it won't destroy you, no matter how painful it is. It does not ruin you, no matter how much you think it's about to. And I use myself as an example because as a Black woman who is moving through this world, who does deal with hypercritical people because of the fact that I'm just Black and a woman, I'm like, see what it could be like if you do fall on your face and know that it is possible for you to still stand up through it. But it was a moment for me to understand that in the troublemaking, you will also get some trouble. But it doesn't mean you stop doing the thing. It doesn't mean that your words are no longer necessary or your voice is no longer necessary. It might mean, reset yourself, recalibrate, get smarter, get more thoughtful, and know what your platform is and understand that you're shifting to a new level, so you have to have certain things in place that you might not have had before.
How do you deal with trolls? Because there are people out there who genuinely just want to see you fail. They just want chaos. I've had to deal with my fair share of trolls earlier on in my career, where when I was trying to build a personal brand for myself, I had these trolls. They would message my wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, and they would say, break up with Jacob. He's going to be bad for your career.
Wow.
They would email conference organizers and they would say, you don't want to book this guy. I mean, they would go all out. They would leave angry comments on my blog. And it caused a lot of tension between my wife, my then girlfriend, and I, because we were living together. We were arguing about this stuff. And we spent probably a solid year of our lives just trying to defend ourselves as much as we can, arguing with these people publicly, right? Tweets going back and forth. And then finally we just stopped, and we didn't give them any more spotlight. We didn't give them any more fuel. We stopped engaging with them and they disappeared. And at least for me, I learned a very important lesson, which is don't feed the trolls, because they just want that. And I realized that nobody who was actually booking me to speak or buying any, but nobody cared about who these people were. They only knew about them because I was giving them attention. So how do you deal with trolls, with people who genuinely want to see you fail and they want to come after you, leaving you negative reviews, telling you you're stupid? Do you ignore them?
I mostly do. Yeah, I absolutely mostly do. I think for me, feeding them is not useful. So I always tell people that my platforms are a dictatorship, not a democracy. You can say whatever you want to say about me on your own platform, but you won't be on mine saying crazy things about me. I will block, report as spam, and delete as I need to. So I also try not to give them the access to do it. They can create 15 accounts. I'll block all 15. Each time you create an account, I'm going to block that one too. And for me, that's a right that we all need to have. We are not obligated to take on other people's crap. We're not obligated to listen to people when they're like, oh my God, I can't believe you blocked me. Why would I not block you? It's like me welcoming you into opening the door to my house, and then you're standing in my living room yelling and cursing at me. What? No, get out of my house. So for trolls, don't give them air. Get block and delete, which pisses them off. And then, there are a few times when I might respond to a couple, but I respond and then I'll block. We do not need to receive everybody's crap. We don't.
What if it's in person? You're at a company and there are always those people at a company who are, maybe they're backstabbing you, they're trying to sabotage you, and you have to see these people day to day. Any suggestions or recommendations on how to deal with those types of toxic people?
Toxic people, I try not to be around them. I really try not to be around them because there's just nothing you can gain from it. They will just suck all the life out of you, and it is not worth it. So if it's a coworker, doing as much as possible to not be in a room with them. If you have to do it in a meeting, don't sit next to them. And then maybe being honest and telling your boss, here's why I find it tough to work with this person. Here's where I've been undermined and lied about a few times. Here's the thing that makes this hard for me to be productive while they're on my team. Being honest. Because we spend so much time at work. So much time. So imagine somebody making your life a living hell while you're at work and you can't tell anybody. If it gets me fired that I say, hey, this person has really made it tough for me to do my best job, then it's not the company I was supposed to be in.
Yeah. Nope. I think that's great advice. Have you ever dealt with imposter syndrome? Or how do you deal with imposter syndrome if it ever comes up?
Yeah, I think imposter syndrome is a universal issue. And I've absolutely dealt with it. I have a TED Talk that now has over 5 million views.
Getting close to 6. It's very close.
Very close. And I said no to it twice because I didn't think I was ready. I thought I didn't have enough time to prepare, So in those moments, I think knowing that imposter syndrome can be a driver of good things or a stunter, right? So we should use our imposter syndrome to make us stay on our toes and get better at our crafts, right? But what it could also do is it can make you say no to yes opportunities, make you think that you are not enough, or you're not qualified for a role, or you're not gonna handle this new title well. I think imposter syndrome is such a universal issue. It just shapeshifts as we move around in our career. And it's something we have to constantly be cognizant of, is that am I operating from a place of imposter syndrome, or do I actually not think I'm ready for it?
Can you actually share, and I know you've talked about this so much with so many different podcasts you've been on, you're probably sick of sharing your stories. Can you share your TED Talk story? Because like you said, you got invited twice, you turned it down. My wife was listening to a podcast where I think you said that you rewrote your speech fairly recently before you went on. And for most people who would hear that, they'd be like, oh my God, that sounds terrifying.
Yeah.
But you did it and killed it. So share that story.
Yeah, so I was asked to do the TED Talk first in May 2017. I turned it down because it was the year after my first book came out, and I was on the road a lot. I had 50 speaking engagements that year. So when I asked to do the TED Talk, I'm very clear that TED does not play about their talks. It's almost a part-time job because they get you a coach, they make you edit your script, whole lot of things. So I was like, yeah, I definitely am not gonna have time to add a TED Talk to my already nuts calendar, because I was afraid that if I didn't have the preparation that they would want me to have, I would bomb. Like, I was afraid that I wasn't ready to take that stage and show up in the way I needed to. So a few months later, they asked me to be on a panel at TED. And I was like, can't do it. I'm actually emceeing and keynoting a conference that day. So a couple of weeks before TED, I think 3 weeks before TED, I was like, you know what? I don't have to be at the conference I'm emceeing until the day after. So you know what? I'm going to go for the first day because I can go cheer on my friends. And when I reached out to them for a day pass, they were like, well, if you can come, we want you to speak. And I was like, whoa, that's 3 weeks away. And I was about to turn it down for a third time because I was like, I definitely can't get a talk together, memorized, and be able to kill a stage in 3 weeks. That's madness. And I called my friend Unique Jones Gibson. I was like, so TED wants me to do this talk. It's in 3 weeks. Everybody else has already had a coach. They've had their talks figured out. And I'd be coming in with none of that, you know. And my friend said, everybody's not you. She's like, you've been on stages every other day. That's been your coach. You've been speaking for 8 years. That's been your coach. So basically, get off my phone and go write this talk. And I did just that. I got off the phone. The next morning, I was going on to a different city for a flight because I was speaking. And I wrote the TED Talk in an Uber. I turned it in as the Uber pulled up to the airport. I was expecting them to be like, you know what, you're right. Never mind. So I landed in the city that I was going, and their email was like, oh my God, we love it. We only had a couple of edits. And it was like, not even major edits. So yeah, the day of the talk came. I basically memorized it in the 12 hours before the talk. And I stepped on that stage and gave this talk like I had been doing it 1,000 times, that exact talk. It was like an out-of-body experience. The talk that you all see is a talk I gave. There was no editing magic necessary. There was no there's no let me go revisit my script. It just poured out of me. And that talk was featured on the TED homepage a month later, the first one from that event. It now has over 5.5 million views. I've had thousands of emails from people all over the world who've said what that talk did for them. And I've had countless speaking engagements from that talk. And it really made me think about how I almost didn't do it because I was afraid, because of imposter syndrome, because I didn't want to bomb, because I didn't think I was ready. And I almost did not do it. But between Pat Mitchell, the TED curator, and my friend, I wasn't allowed to say no. And they're the reasons that I got on that stage. They're the ones who did not allow my no to stand. And I'm so thankful for it. And I'm just like, knowing that we operate in that way a lot, we have to be more intentional not to. We have to be clear that our fears are standing in the way of the lives that we want to live, the life that we say is our biggest wish. So we have to acknowledge the fear and then move past it, move forward anyway.
Yeah. I was actually going to ask you, do you ever wonder what would have happened if you never gave that talk and how different your life would be if you never got on that stage?
No, because I'm like, that's a domino. I don't even want to think about that butterfly effect. But there's so many moments that we've said no to something we should have said yes to.
Yeah.
And that would have been an expensive no.
Yeah, that would have been a very, very expensive no. We only have a few minutes left, and there's one other topic that I want to make sure we touch on, and that's this theme of boundaries. And I know this is a very, very important topic, personally and professionally, setting boundaries with coworkers, even with family members, with leaders. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of boundaries and how you go about, or how you recommend people go about setting clear boundaries in their lives, whether it's personally or professionally?
Yeah, I think boundaries are important. Boundaries are self-care. It is, oh man, they're so necessary, because we cannot have everybody having access to us. We cannot, because then we won't be able to focus on the things we're supposed to focus on. Because if everyone has equal access to us, how do you know what's priority? Yeah. Right? Like, how do you know what actually matters? So boundaries professionally and personally are a form of justice for ourselves, because we have to take care of us in this whole process.
Yeah. I find that the boundaries aspect at work can be hard, right?
Yeah.
How do you say no to a leader? How do you say no to a coworker who's asking you for things? Because you want to be viewed as that go-getter employee who's really excited to be there, who can do anything. But at the same time, when you say yes to everything, you burn out, you get disengaged, and then bad things happen. I don't know if you've ever been in a situation where you've said yes to too much, but how do you make that work boundary?
I absolutely have said yes too much. I think it's important to say, hey, no, I can't be able to do it. Or maybe, no, I can't do it right now. Or no, not on that deadline. Every no is not a permanent no. Sometimes no, I can't do it for today, but I can get it done for tomorrow. You know, we have to make sure that people don't forget that we're still people. We're not just employees and CEOs and just numbers in the company. We are still people. And when our bosses and the people we report to don't honor that means they're not honoring us as people. I tell my team, hey, I have this deadline for you. Is this realistic? Because I want you to be able to tell me, no, it's not. Next week is more likely. Then I go, okay, because I just want to know the expectation. Any person who is asking you to constantly self-sacrifice and like work yourself to the bone purely for the well-being of the company is not thinking about you as a person. So us as leaders have to also make sure that we are giving people permission to draw boundaries.
Yep. So maybe last question for you before I ask where people can go find you and connect with some of your content. Well, two last questions. One is, what are your biggest fears currently? Okay, good. I feel like I'm asking you something that not everybody who's asked you on every other podcast.
That's a good one. My biggest fears currently. Oh, that's a good one. I don't know.
Yes.
That's a really good one, because I'm just like, I don't have an answer readily available for you. Because I don't think I've been operating in a space of fear recently, because I've been pretty much like, leave it all out on the field. Because I'll tell you, when Professional Troublemaker was coming on, when it was about to be launched, my fear was that I was not going to hit the New York Times list, because as a Black woman whose book is considered prescriptive in the how-to, I'm trailblazing, because there's Oprah and Michelle Obama are the only ones who look like me who are in this category. I wanted this book to hit the Times list, not just because it is an amazing book and I deeply believe it's transformative, but because I wanted to make sure it opened the door for people. And if I didn't hit the list, what would that messaging say to publishing? Would it now make it harder for somebody else who looks like me to get a book deal that's not a novel or that's talking about, race? So my fear was that I was going to be letting down other people if this didn't happen. So I put everything behind me. I basically wore it as a coat and said, I'm going to do this. So 2 weeks ago, my fear would have been like, I'm afraid I'm not going to make this list. And I'm in a category that's the toughest category in the whole thing, because cookbooks end up in this list, okay? Like random books. You're just like, what? But yeah, I think I'm always afraid of not using my power in service of other people.
That's a good one. And last question is, what is the big takeaway, the best piece of advice, or the most important action item that you hope people walk away with after either reading your book or listening to this, as far as it pertains to trying to conquer fear and being a troublemaker? What's your last piece of advice for everybody listening and watching?
My piece of advice is that normalize being afraid. Don't feel bad that you feel fearful or you're anxious about speaking up. That's normal. What you have to do now is intentionally choose courage in those moments. It is a decision, not a personality trait, a decision to choose courage when it is tough, when fear is easier, and when your comfort zone feels tempting. So I just want people to just keep choosing courage on purpose.
Yeah. Well, Luvvie, where can people go to learn more about you or connect with you? I see your book back there. Maybe you can grab your book and show it to people who might be watching the video here. There we go. That's a good looking book right there.
Professional Troublemaker, the Fear Fighter Manual. It is available everywhere books are sold. I narrated the audiobook, which just got an Earphones Award with the Audiophile magazine, so I'm excited about that.
Oh,
and
nice.
I'm all over the internet. Luvvie's my handle on all the platforms. Luvvie. I'm really easy to find. I have my own social platform called lovenation.com. And I am around. I'm constantly trying to use my voice for the greater good. So,
yeah, you're pretty easy to find with a simple Google search.
So easy. So easy.
Well, Luvvie, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to speak with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, Jacob.
Oh, of course. And thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, my guest today has been Luvvie Ajayi Jones. Make sure to check out her brand new book, Professional Troublemaker, the Fear Fighter Manual. And we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. If you want more content just like this, then please remember to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you want to know what it takes to be a future-ready leader, based on interviews that I personally did with 140 of the world's top CEOs, then make sure to go to futureleadercourse.com.